Tonight, we're relaunching one of the most popular projects we undertake before elections, fact-checking those political ads. I'll show you where they're stretching the truth a little bit, where they left out important context, and where they got it right. Now, let's take a look at a recent attack ad that's aimed at conservative Republican Joe Kent. It's paid for by the DCCC, that's the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the group that's working really hard to elect Democrats. Kent is in a rematch with incumbent Democrat Marie Camp Perez. She's a moderate to conservative Democrat in what used to be a pretty reliably Republican district. Here's why this race matters on a national scale. Right now, the U.S. House of Representatives is controlled by a really small Republican majority. Take a look. It's 220 Republicans, 212 Democrats, and 3 vacancies. That's because 2 Democrats died and 1 Republican resigned. So it's probably really more like 221 for Republicans and 214 for the Democrats. That is a super small margin for Republicans. If Democrats can beat just 4 Republicans while holding all their own seats, they will control the House. And that is huge when it comes to the balance of power on a national basis. Now, Camp Perez is a Democrat who's only been in office for about a year and a half, and her party desperately wants to keep that seat. Before she won, Republicans had that seat, as I mentioned, for 12 years. And the election in 2022 between these same 2 candidates was so close. These are the numbers from the Washington Secretary of State's office for that election. Perez won with 160,000 votes, but Kent, he had 157,600, and so he lost by just 2,600 votes. So that is why you are seeing so many ads in this race and why you're going to keep seeing them right up until Election Day. Even you Oregonians who are not going to be voting on the race, your TVs are going to be showing those as well. And it's because our market stretches into Southwest Washington. So sorry, you get to watch them with everybody else. Okay, that's the background. Now, let's take a look at this attack ad, which is not paid for by the Perez campaign. It is paid for by the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee that I told you about earlier. Ready? Here we go.
I voted Republican in the past, and I am not voting for Joe Kent.
He actually pals around with white nationalists and neo-Nazis.
There's no place for that kind of extremism here.
Okay, now let's add a little, in fact, a lot of context here. I don't know anything about the 3 people that you hear from in the ad, but that headline, ooh, that is some skillful political manipulation because it allows you to think kind of whatever you want. Does it mean that he's such an attractive candidate to white nationalists that they filled his meetings to hear about his great plans that they love? Or does it mean that people in his district wanted him to clear the air about whether he and white nationalists actually do believe the same things? When I first saw it and heard the woman say he pals around with white nationalists and neo-Nazis, I really thought that maybe they'd caught him at a barbecue having beers and chuckling with those folks. But no, they don't have that. And I think that headline really does not mean what it leads you to believe that it means, okay? I tracked down the paper that the ad cites. It's the Chronicle. That's a newspaper in Centralia, Washington. They had a reporter at a town hall meeting that Kent held in March of 2022. Now, the story reports that 5 men drove 5 hours from Idaho to attend the meeting in Washington, and another drove down from Tacoma. The article states that the 6 were there to defend another man named Nick Fuentes, who many news outlets had called a white nationalist. Kent was distancing himself from Fuentes, and apparently those guys didn't like it. The paper reported that the men peppered Kent with questions about nationalist beliefs. The paper reported that eventually the gathering of locals actually got a bit hostile towards the men and then cheered when Kent said his platform was about fighting for all Americans regardless of skin color or religion. Earlier in that same week, OPB had reported that Kent did distance himself from Fuentes after publicity that the two had a phone call when Kent first launched his campaign, and that Fuentes had said that he'd used his social media platform to support Joe Kent. Kent repeated that on our Straight Talk show with Laurel Porter in 2022.
When I first announced I was going to run for Congress, I had a wide range of consultants that reached out to me and offered their services. I did speak with Nick once. He talked about doing things with social media, and I just assumed that he was another consultant. I had no idea who Fuentes was or any of the controversy around him. So that's the extent of our association. I know one of my opponents, attempted to link us together, and then since then Fuentes has been attacking me. His goon squad even shows up to many of my events to say that I'm not enough of a white nationalist or something like that, and I'm not a white nationalist at all.
So I think when you look at that headline, you should be thinking that it refers to the men who showed up and peppered Kent with questions. But the ad uses the headline and a comment from a woman in the ad to suggest that he pals around with white supremacists and neo-Nazis. That's a pretty big stretch, in my opinion. Okay, let's look at another part of the ad.
Joe Kent hired one of the Proud Boys to work on his campaign.
All right, on this one, yeah, I think they got it right. That is a fact. They sourced the Associated Press from July 27th of 2022. I found this AP story from July 26th, the day before, and hey, I guess we can see where the ad folks got that shot of Kent that they're using. It's right there. This was apparently taken at a rally to support those arrested after the January 6th riot at the Capitol. It's used with an article from an Associated Press reporter who's writing about Kent and other Republicans that experts that they interviewed believed were concerned that they had connections to right-wing extremists. The article cites campaign finance disclosures showing that Kent paid $11,000 to Graham Jorgensen, who was identified as a Proud Boy in a law enforcement report. The Proud Boys, by the way, if you don't know, are an all-male extremist group that led the storming of Congress on January 6, 2021. Kent's campaign told the AP that Jorgensen was a low-level worker who handed out literature, put up signs, and denied he had any current affiliation with outside organizations. So the ad states that Kent hired a consultant who was a member of the Proud Boys. Maybe not a consultant, but according to the AP, the Proud Boy part is accurate. Now, to the last part.
He will ban abortion without exceptions for rape or incest.
Okay, well, that abortion comment is backed up, they say, by our own Straight Talk show from 2022. So let's take a look.
I would move to have a national ban on abortions. I believe life begins at conception. I think we have to have a pro-life culture in our country.
Okay, that's pretty clear. So yes, they got that one right too. Kent says the only exception should be if the mother's life is in danger. And then the final bit of the ad is this.
Very angry, hateful man.
I voted for Republicans for much of my life, but I will never ever vote for Joe Kent.
DCCC is responsible for the content of this advertising.
Now, there's no fact checking to do on that last part. Those are opinions. So there you go. The ad is accurate in many parts, although I think it's a big stretch based on the evidence they provide to say that Joe Kent hangs around with white supremacists and neo-Nazis. We're going to take a look at an attack ad aimed at the incumbent in that seat, Congresswoman Lori Chavez-DeRemer, a Democrat. The 3rd district seat, this matchup is very important, not just for voters in the district, but also nationally. And that's why the National Republican Congressional Committee is pouring money into the race to try to take that seat back. Now, let's take a look at a recent attack ad that's aimed at Perez, paid for by that group, the National Republican Campaign Committee. They're the national group trying to elect more Republicans to the U.S. House.
Marie Camp Perez has ignored our border crisis.
Listen, like nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border.
Okay, this ad has been playing almost nonstop, and that's the opening salvo. The attack ad will build on that theme, trying to convince you that Camp Perez is out of touch with the border issues and the drug crisis on our streets. Now, I tracked down that clip, and it's taken way out of context. So here it is on the YouTube version of the show Pod Save America, where it aired. It was recorded after Perez won her election to Congress. The host was asking how she did it in such a Republican district. Listen to this entire comment now.
Listen, like nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border. Like that's just not. People stay awake at night worrying that their kid is going to relapse or that, you know, someone's going to drop out of school or they're going to lose their house.
Okay, that was the whole comment. Now, when you hear the entire comment, it kind of changes the meaning, doesn't it? The ad left out important context. When we add back the context, it shows that Perez is convinced people care more about what's happening with their own family and in their own community than the national talking points being served up about the southern border. So I'm going to call that clip in the ad misleading.
Perez isn't worried. That's where the flood of fentanyl is coming from, and it's killing our kids.
Okay, well, we don't need to fact check that source. I believe all of those claims. They're accurate. Fentanyl is awful. Lots and lots of it's coming from Mexico. I did fact check it, but yeah, it's accurate. It's certainly killing our kids. But I've not found any statements from Perez saying that she's not worried about drugs coming into our communities, just the opposite. I found many where she said she is and very concerned. Interestingly, by the way, this past February, she co-sponsored a bill that would tighten security at the border and require immigration officers to immediately detain and expel what they called inadmissible aliens. Okay, let's see a bit more of the ad.
The Perez sleeps easy in D.C., while overdoses here skyrocket.
Listen, like, nobody stays awake at night worrying about the southern border.
Marie Glues in Camp Perez won't fix this. She's too busy denying it.
This is an age-old sleight of hand. You start with a premise that's not accurate, and then you build on your premise. They're saying, well, if she says that no one stays awake worrying about the border, she must not care about drugs or about people overdosing and dying on our streets. Now, again, I have found many comments from Perez that she is deeply concerned about the impact fentanyl and other drugs are having on her community and our country. So I'm rating that entire statement as false. In fact, on her campaign site, it says that she believes in fighting the drug crisis through increased border security, stricter punishments for sale and possession, along with expanded access to treatment and rehab and job opportunities. So, all in all, I gotta say, Republican Congressional Campaign Committee, this is a very misleading ad. You should really try harder next time to find some legit policy that she believes in and you think is wrong. Otherwise, you're going to continue to look pretty darn silly trying to sell obvious falsehoods to the public. We told you how the balance of power in Congress is really up for grabs this November. A lot of focus is on the U.S. House of Representatives, where Republicans hold just a real slim majority. If Democrats flip 4 seats from red to blue, assuming the rest stay the same, they would gain the House majority. Basically, Democrats need a net gain of 4 seats. And one of the more contentious races where Democrats hope to flip a seat is right here at home in Oregon's 5th Congressional District. Here's a look at the area. It starts out near the corner of southeast Portland and stretches all the way down through the eastern half of the Willamette Valley and then across the Cascades to Bend and Sisters. Right now it's represented by freshman incumbent Republican Lori Chavez-DeRemer. But she faces a big challenge from Democrat Janelle Bynum, a former state representative here in Oregon. It's worth noting that Bynum actually defeated Chavez-DeRemer twice, once in 2016, again in 2018, in order to win that Oregon State House seat. Another reason Democrats are really pushing for this district is because Joe Biden won the 5th district in Oregon by more than 8 percentage points back in 2020, so they think they've got a shot. And because this race is expected to be so close, the ads, of course, getting nasty with less than a month to go. The ad starts with a video which looks like it's from Portland. Not every street looks like this, but there are plenty that do.
You can't walk down the street without stepping over someone. This push to decriminalize from politicians like Janelle Bynum, that's why we're here. She pushed to decriminalize drugs like fentanyl.
Okay, some context here, please. Bynum did indeed vote for Measure 110, which decriminalized small amounts of hard drugs in Oregon. The Washington Examiner, cited in that ad, ran this headline last May. Democrats put faith in House candidate Bynum, but past support for decriminalizing fentanyl threatens chances. In their story, they linked to this Facebook post back in 2020 where Bynum says she is voting yes on Measure 110. She also writes, I think we can get better legislation through the legislature. This was a very hard toss-up. Now, a lot of other people voted for it as well, more than 1.3 million Oregonians. That same article points out Measure 110 passed with 58% of the vote, and Multnomah County voted in favor of it at a rate of 3-1. It's worth noting that Bynum also voted for House Bill 4002, which recriminalized drugs, including fentanyl. Okay, back to the ad.
Worse than decriminalizing drugs, Janelle Bynum wrote the plan to release thousands of criminals from prison early.
You know, it's hard enough, put hardened criminals back on the street.
All right, what about this one? Well, the ad cites the Oregonian newspaper from June 15, 2020. I found that article. Sure enough, Bynum was one of 4 lawmakers who lobbied Governor Kate Brown to let prisoners out early. Now, it's worth remembering this was during COVID. Bynum argued that the prisons were overly congested and could be a death sentence for people with severe medical problems, and that the appropriate humanitarian response would be to release them as soon as possible. According to the Oregon Justice Commission, by the way, while lawmakers wanted nearly 2,000 set free, Governor Brown did indeed release 963 adults in custody from July of 2020 through October of 2021. And of those, 34%, so that's 1 in 3, were arrested for a new crime within 2 years. And 20%, that's 1 in 5, were convicted of a new crime in 2 years. And 12% went all the way back to prison. Okay, so that claim is accurate. Bynum was indeed one of 4 lawmakers who pushed to get inmates released, although lots of other outside groups were calling for that as well. We'll examine an attack ad aimed at her opponent, Republican incumbent Lori Chavez-DeRemer. First, some background. The 5th Congressional District in Oregon is an odd shape that stretches from near Portland to Sun River in the south and over to the west nearly to Salem and Corvallis. It used to be pretty solidly Democratic, but DeRemer, the Republican, won the last election. In 2022, Democrats in the Oregon legislature redrew the boundaries to include Bend, which brought in even more Democrats. But then there are also even more unaffiliated voters. The Secretary of State's office shows there are 171,000 registered Democrats in the district, 146,000 Republicans, and 186,000 unaffiliated voters. Many observers, including the respected Cook Political Report, call this race a toss-up. So it's going to be interesting. All right, let's get to this ad. The first thing to notice is that it's paid for by the campaign of Janelle Bynum. Now, that's different than many of the ads that we see that are paid for by congressional PACs. Those are the outside groups that specialize in negative campaign ads. Okay, here we go.
I'm Janelle Bynum, and I approve this message.
I'm a Republican, but in this election, I'm not voting as a member of a political party, but as an American. Too much is at stake. Our democracy, our rule of law.
All right, let's start right here with that person. Have you ever wondered in these ads if the people that you see are actors or real people? I certainly have. So I checked into it. I wanted to know if that person really is a Republican. So I contacted the Bynum campaign. And you know what? They shared her name with me. And yes, she is a Republican and does live in the district. So thanks for sharing that. And yes, that is accurate. She is. This next section is where they take the biggest shots at DeRemer.
We need leaders who will stand up to Donald Trump. That is not Lori Chavez-DeRemer.
Okay, let's check that out. The ad cites this article by Oregon Public Broadcasting from March 6th of 2024. And sure enough, the headline says Chavez-DeRemer endorses Trump, and it links to a posting on X, which used to be called Twitter. And there she is, tweeting that she will be supporting Trump for president. So, yes, we can confirm that, yes, that ad got that one right. DeRemer, a Republican who is running in a district with more Democrats than Republicans, is supporting the former Republican president.
She's supporting Trump and MAGA extremists, threatening everything we value in Oregon.
Okay, so this line's a little bit tougher. Is she supporting Trump? Yes, absolutely. MAGA extremists, though, there's really no evidence of that, although many Democrats have labeled House Speaker Mike Johnson, who is a staunch conservative, as a MAGA extremist. And she did support him for Speaker of the House. So I guess if you want to believe that the Speaker of the House is a MAGA extremist, okay. But when I hear that term, really, I picture folks, the kind of folks who stormed Congress. So in my opinion, that part's a little bit of a stretch. And then the last part.
Oppose Lori Chavez-DeRemer before it's too late.
All right, that last part is just a call to action. No fact-checking there. This one against incumbent Republican Lori Chavez-DeRemer of Oregon's 5th Congressional District. The ad accuses her of repeatedly voting against Social Security. It comes from the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee working to get Democrats elected. So let's start by watching the first part of the ad so that we're all on the same page here.
Social Security. It's America's contract with the middle class. You pay into it every paycheck. But will it be there when you retire? The congressional record shows Lori Chavez-DeRemer voted 26 times against Social Security and Medicare. 26 times.
Yeah, how about that? Well, that's a really explosive claim. For national politicians, you got to understand Social Security is the third rail of politics. You touch it, you die. So if she really did vote 26 times against that, it would be huge. But this is such a surprising allegation that even when I asked the DeRemer campaign about it, they said they had no idea what the Democrats are talking about here. And you know what? I believe them. It took some time, but I dug into it and I did find out where it's coming from. And in my opinion, Democrats are playing games with this one. Let me explain. Lori Chavez-DeRemer took office in early January of 2023 after being elected in November of 2022. At the end of her very first month in office on January 31st, the congressional record shows that DeRemer cast a vote with her fellow Republicans. The vote came at the end of debate over Resolution 75, sponsored by Republicans. It dealt with COVID and the public health emergencies, as well as requiring a study on federal agencies using work-from-home policies. Near the end of the debate, Democratic Representative Jim McGovern of Massachusetts rose to make the following statement. Madam Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to ensure that none of the bills in this rule take effect unless it is certified that they do not decrease Social Security benefits. Now, I know that sounds like a bunch of legal language, but what he's saying is a vote no on this thing that we're debating so that we can next vote yes on my statement about Social Security. That's what he's trying to get everybody to do, vote no. But Republicans hold a majority in the House, and the winning vote was yes, not no. Chavez-DeRemer, a Republican, voted yes with her Republican colleagues in the majority. And because of that, the proposal that the Representative McGovern, wanted to vote on instead, that one stating that Social Security benefits must be protected, well, that did not get a vote. They moved on to something else. And so that is what the folks who created the attack ads are using as one of the many times that DeRemer voted against Social Security and Medicare, even though the wording of that initial proposal had nothing to do with Social Security or Medicare. Jim Moore, a political science professor at Pacific University, says it's an age-old trick that goes back maybe 40 years.
Remember Newt Gingrich? This is what happens when you put a PhD in Congress. So he was there in Congress. He was the leader of the minority, but he wasn't the head of the minority. Republicans have been in the minority for 40 years. So as he's moving up in the leadership of the minority in the late 80s and especially into the early 90s, he started figuring out these kinds of techniques. When the Democrats are voting on something that they're going to vote on party lines, we can put things that we want in there, they'll vote no, and we can campaign on that. And so it's just grown over the times. This is 40 plus years that we've been seeing this kind of thing. The kind of thing that people may really remember is the Republican House a decade ago voted dozens of times to repeal Obamacare. Did it ever have a chance of passing? No, because it would go to the Senate and they were going to vote against it. But they're piling things up saying, look, I voted to stop this horrible program 53 times or whatever it was. And so it's a technique Newt Gingrich developed, has been growing over time, and it's now used almost as a sport just to set up ads for the election year.
I don't know about you, but I find this stuff fascinating. You might find it infuriating because here we are in an election year, and that's exactly how these votes are being used. Similar votes followed during Chavez-DeRemer's entire first year in Congress in 2023. Here's another one. On May 23rd, the House was debating a Republican-backed resolution that dealt with fentanyl, the EPA, heavy truck engine rules, and student loan debt. During that debate on the resolution, Representative Teresa Leger Fernandez, a Democrat from New Mexico, rose to say this: Mr. Speaker, if we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment to the rule to provide for consideration of a resolution that states that it is the House's responsibility to protect and preserve Social Security and Medicare for our future generations and reject any cuts to these essential programs. But once again, DeRemer voted with her Republican colleagues, and the previous question, the resolutions they were debating, well, those passed. And because of that, the amendment to the rule that Rep. Leger Fernandez wanted to add that what she said about Social Security and Medicare, well, that did not get a vote. They just moved on to something else. And so again, the creators of the attack ad against DeRemer counted her yes vote for that original resolution, the thing that they were debating, as a no vote for Social Security and Medicare.
It was interesting as I started to dig into it, because when I just hear the ad, I'm thinking there's going to be a vote to reduce Social Security, and she's going to say yes or no, but it's nothing like that.
No, it's never an up or down vote, and that's the way Congress works now. So many things are buried in there because they're in these clumpy bills. There's so many things that are buried in there. So when you vote for something, you might actually be voting against something at the same time, just because of the way the amendments work and things like that. So unless you're a parliamentarian or you're sitting there watching exactly what's happening, all that subtlety is lost. The politicians know that, their campaigns know that, the big contributors know that. So they just use those nuances to make it into a sledgehammer.
Now I have lots of other examples. One from November of last year. It was ready to go as well, but you know what? I think you're getting the idea. It's the same strategy over and over again. Debate a bill, a Democrat rises and says, if we defeat this current bill, I've got a resolution to protect Social Security and Medicare. But the initial bill passes due to the Republican majority, and the creators of the attack ad counted that as yet another vote by DeRemer against Social Security and Medicare.
It feels like with this one, it is the thinnest margin of technical accuracy. And for most of the people at home, it's not accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. It is on its face not accurate. On legal terms, it is accurate. So, look at it as you may. Anytime you say somebody is directly attacking Social Security, unless they're going out there and saying, here's a bill that is going to actually reduce the benefits of people who now have Social Security, they're not attacking Social Security. Even when people say they are going to reduce Social Security, they're saying for people who begin getting Social Security in 35 years. It's not now.
Right, because it's a third rail. Yeah, it's a third rail of politics, right?
Yeah, it's the third rail of politics. And why is it important? Because people over the age of 65 are the group that turns out at the highest rate. So Medicare, Social Security, those are the things that you hit on if you're trying to get that voting group to move.
A quick internet check reveals that DeRemer has said she supports Social Security and Medicare, by the way, telling the New York Times way back when she was running for office in October of 2022, absolutely not. She'd been asked if she would support cuts to Medicare and Social Security as a way to rein in federal spending. Cutting those programs is not where I, as a Republican, see myself. I want to make sure that we can fill those coffers. So let's come back full circle. The question is this. Did Lori Chavez-DeRemer vote 26 times against Social Security and Medicare? No, not directly. At best, this ad is highly misleading. And I suspect many of you now think it's just flat out false. As the professor said, both Democrats and Republicans do play this game and have for years, but it's the Democrats in the spotlight for this one. Now, one of the questions that we get over and over and over again when we fact check these ads is, wait a minute, how can you, in good conscience and as ethical journalists, allow ads with false information on your air in the first place? It's a good question. Lo and behold, we got that question several times this week from viewers. Marcy wrote in to say, why doesn't KGW verify and fact check these political ads before they're aired on KGW? All networks just want the money, and citizens are not aware networks air ads, whether truthful or not. If it's not true and verified, don't air it. Well, we appreciate you asking, and I agree, it is confusing. Here's the details, though. As journalists, we cannot air information on our news that we know to be false. That's great. And many commercials for consumer products can't air false information about the product. That's great, too. So why can political candidates do it? It comes down to our federal communications license. That's the license that KGW has from the government to actually broadcast our TV signal. FCC laws prohibit TV stations from refusing or censoring political ads from any legally qualified candidate. So that's tough. It's a First Amendment issue, they say. It's as says Dr. William Lee also. He's a journalism professor at the University of Georgia, because political speech is entitled to the greatest First Amendment protection.
Any effort to regulate political advertising would run up against a very strong First Amendment tradition where the Supreme Court simply believes that debate on public issues and public people should be uninhibited, robust, and wide open.
In fact, the law lets politicians say almost anything they want in a commercial. Their ads are regulated by the FCC, which applies just two rules. One is that all the candidates have to have the same opportunity to buy commercial time on the TV stations. And then number two, there's a prohibition on censorship, meaning candidates can say pretty much whatever they want. And the FCC generally does not ensure the accuracy of the statements. The idea is that if a candidate doesn't like what their opponent is saying about them, they're free to clear it up with their own ad.
A false factual statement could be subject to defamation. But again, the Supreme Court basically believes that the remedy for false statements in political speech is more speech.
Okay, only in rare circumstances can a TV station deny an ad from any candidate based on its contents. We have to give every candidate the same opportunity to buy ad time, and what they want to use that ad time for, pretty much up to them. And because they cannot be censored, there's not much of anything that we can do about it. Now, the candidates can duke it out amongst themselves in the legal system if they really are offended about what the other person said about them. And you know what? We're actually seeing that play out in court in Oregon right now. 2 years ago, Andrea Salinas' campaign ran an ad claiming that her opponent for Oregon's 6th Congressional District, Mike Erickson, was charged with drug possession. He was pulled over in 2016 and arrested, and oxycodone was found in his car, but he was charged with driving under the influence and never charged with drug possession. He said the pill was his wife's. Erickson sued Salinas, who ended up winning that race, by the way, and now 2 years later, that lawsuit is still in the Court of Appeals, and the two are running a rematch election. So that's a big reason that we use our time here on The Story to fact check these ads for you, because legally, the station cannot refuse to air them. So again, if there's an ad that you have a question about, let us know. We really do enjoy digging into these. Here's the email address again, thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.